Welcome to the Boat Buyer's Secret Weapon Series. I'm your host, Captain Matt, and today we're talking pontoons and how pontoons are made. We're going to go through the entire process in detail so that as you're shopping for a new or used pontoon, you know what the structure is, how it's built, and that's going to help you research and investigate and decide what the right option is for you. So let's start with how they're made. The first thing that's going to happen, we'll go through this kind of in order. First thing that's going to happen is they're going to make the tubes. So when they make the tubes, they just have a flat sheet of aluminum, and that aluminum is going to have a specific alloy that each manufacturer is going to use what they feel is best and a certain thickness. It could be 0.080, could be 0.01, or 0.1. It depends on the manufacturer and the thickness, but those are the two most common. Once it's rolled together, they roll it through a machine that forms it. Then they're going to go ahead and weld all the way down that seam and have it turned into a cylinder. In that cylinder, most manufacturers are going to go ahead and put a bulkhead in, which means they're going to cut a piece of aluminum to slide in that cylinder, and they're going to cap it in that portion. There's usually going to be some sort of a 3 to 4 inches of a gap where that bulkhead is going to go in, that baffle is going to go in, so that when they put the tubes together, because they're going to be made in 4-foot sections or so, and they're going to go ahead and slide them together, maybe 8-foot sections. They're going to slide them together, and they could use a pie crust kind of imprint where they crimp the edges and they slide together, they groove together and have a fit, or they could just go one inside the other and fit like that, and then they're going to weld around the edges again to create the actual tunes themselves. Now, let's talk the different types of setups that you're going to get. There's two major setups that you'll have, either a pontoon, two pontoons, what I call a sport tune. Every manufacturer has their own language, but it's two pontoons on the outside and then about a 2/3 length tune in the center that doesn't go all the way back to the motor pod. The motor pod is separate and not a structural component of that tube. And then a full Tri-Toon, which goes from the bow to the stern. The motor pod is integrated into that third tune. Most structural support, most buoyancy in the true Tri-Toon, a lot of structural support and extra buoyancy in the sport tune, and then the least structural support, the least buoyancy in the pontoon, but lower cost. So about $3,000 to $10,000 as you go up, and you can go usually on most manufacturers' website and see the sport tune's going to be an upgrade. $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. The pontoon, the full length pontoon, could be $7,000, $8,000, and as you get additional shapes and other things that they do to increase the buoyancy, increase the performance, that's going to go up from there. So you can see all that. The size of the tune is going to make a difference. The older days, they used to do 23, 25 is pretty standard. Now you're seeing some 27, and you're also seeing some different shapes. You've got JC with their U-shaped tune, and they say, hey, this makes it easier to mount the flooring and the bracing. If we just can mount it straight to the tube, it's more structurally supported. That's their style. You've got some that say, hey, we're going to use a different shape on the center tube. Bennington has an elliptical tube. You can see it's kind of an oval that gives you a little bit more surface area and more buoyancy. And then you have companies like Premier, I think, uses this. There's a few others. Manitou uses an oval shape. And they say, hey, we're going to get even more surface area and do our tunes in this shape. Others say, you know what, we're going to make our center tune a bigger diameter. So they're going to go 25 on the outer tubes and 27 on that center tube. Everybody does it different for a different reason. Ask the manufacturer, ask the dealer, hey, why do they do it this way? And I haven't had the opportunity to run this one versus this one versus this one versus this one to know, hey, I can feel the difference. I think what's going to happen is if you run it you can't feel the difference if you don't do it right after each other in the same conditions and the same type of boat. In my experience, anyway, I haven't been able to tell the difference, and I think I'm pretty well versed in feeling the difference between rides of boats. But I think you really got to do it one right after another to get the sense. And hopefully I'll have the opportunity to set something like that up at an in-water show or something. Okay, so that's the tubes. Now, here's something that's important to know about the tubes. What is everything attached with? Well, everything is welded. So your splash guard, that's welded on. Your full-length keel, that's where they fold those nose cones together, and then they're going to weld on that seam where they come together. That makes, on these, they're the dolphin-style nose cones. And then you'll have, in this yellow arrow here, the splash guard. That splash guard is a portion of the nose cone. So it's two pieces of aluminum that are then welded together, but that fin is actually a structural component of the nose cone. It allows that you have a different shape here. You don't have that dolphin. You've got that sharp angle and a sharp angle on the bottom, which means that when you're going to pull up on a sandbar, it's going to dig in a little bit more. If you hit a log or something in the water, it's going to more likely cause damage. But your splash guard is much, much stronger. It's a structural component. It's a little bit bigger. It's going to splash down more water so that you don't have a wet ride if it's a windy, wavy day. Okay? The nose cone, we talked about that being welded, and then most manufacturers are going to put another finished piece of aluminum on that keel and weld that. And what that's going to do is make that nose cone even stronger, and it's going to make it, if you do hit something, you're less likely to cause damage. The risers are welded on. So what is common? Well, everything that's going to keep this boat afloat is welded. Welding is done in a very manual way. There's not machines that are welding most of these pieces. That center seam may be welded with the machine. Maybe there's like a handful of manufacturers that have a machine that will weld the sections of the pontoon together, like we talked about. Like right here, you can see that weld where the nose cone is welded on, but most of them are going to be done by hand. Hand welding is an art, and unfortunately, there's not many welders, there's not many skilled tradespeople out there, and as they start retiring off, the ones that have been with them 20, 30, 40 years, they're retiring off, and they're having a hard time getting good quality welders that do good work. So what happens is, because it's all manual, because it's all done individually, you could have 3 pontoons that were made in the same day, and the weld quality is significantly different. Maybe they come back from lunch and, they're just not feeling up to it, and they're not on top of their game. Maybe they're hungover in the morning. Maybe there's one welder that's top notch and there's one welder that's an apprentice. You may get different welds on even the same boat, because they're done individually. Okay, so that's the welds. And then you've got all the components. We talked about the splash guard. We talked about the nose cone and that keel right there, your attachment point, and then the risers. All of that is welded together. Once you get to this point, they're going to pressure test typically and test to make sure that the welds are in good shape. Most manufacturers are going to do this. They're going to put some air in it through a little vent hole. And then some manufacturers are going to say, hey, we're going to put a drain plug in the tune. And someone will say, we're going to put a Schrader valve, an air valve, so that you can pressurize this tube. The reality is they're only going to take 3 to 5 pounds of pressure. It's not really enough, in my opinion, that it's gonna avoid your tune from being dented or damaged. But what it is going to do is it's going to allow them to pressure test to make sure there's no holes. Now, on the drain plug, here's my personal opinion on a drain plug. I would rather have a tube that's totally sealed up and that doesn't have a drain that is a likely source of a leak, because you've got another hole in the pontoon that's got to be welded, and you've got a screw or a plug that's going to go in that hole. Well, you've just created another leak point potentially, but they say, hey, if you get water in your tubes, now you can drain it out. Well, if everything is sealed, the only way I'm going to get water in my tubes, if the welds are good, is I hit a rock. I hit an underwater obstruction and put a pinhole in my tubes. If that's the case, there's a hole in my tube and we got to get the water out anyway so we can then drill in. I don't want the source to drain it be the source for getting water in. It doesn't make sense to me. But they do it for that reason. The air valve, they do it so you can repressurize it, but again, 3 to 5 pounds. So once they do pressurize it from a hole in the top, they're going to put it in a solution of soapy water, and they're going to pull it out, and they're going to check for any air bubbles. They're going to spray some soapy water solution on all the welds and all of the points where there could be a leak. And if there is a leak, they're going to circle it with the grease pen, send it back to the welder, and the welder is going to lay another bead of dimes, a row of dimes where they're going to re-weld it to address that issue, okay? So that is the build process of the tubes. Once we get to the tubes, we talked about putting those risers on. Some of them, they call them an M bracket because they kind of look like an M shape. And that's going to allow you to put the cross members on, all right? So we're going from a round surface to getting a flat surface so we can put the cross members on. There's going to be 3 ways they do the risers. So the one is we're going to do a riser that's just a single riser. It's going to take a single beam. That's the red arrow. The blue arrow, we're going to do a full-length riser that goes all the way down. That's more structurally sound, right? Instead of having individual brackets, we got a full-length bracket. It gives you more support so that you don't flex. You know, you don't have any, let's see if I can do that. You don't have any flex in the tubes over time, which is going to cause problems to the furniture, the flooring, and all that. And then you've got two full-length brackets going all the way down like you see in the green. So why does that matter? Well, as you put these cross members on, you can see in this one, we've got individual brackets. So there's a gap, which means that structurally there's a flex point, you know, and that usually 24-inch on center that you're going to see, hey, there could be a little flex there. It's just not as strong, but there's less material, so they're able to build it at a cheaper price point. The other thing that everybody does a little bit different is what type of cross member are we going to use? Are we going to use a hat channel, which I believe is the strongest method to use, that blue arrow, the C channel, this red arrow, an I-beam channel right here, or a Z channel, which I'll show you in a second. Each one of those has their pluses and minuses. I think the hat channel is the strongest, and then obviously the thickness of that part is going to make a big difference on the sturdiness of the boat and the structural stability, okay? So once you get done, you get something that looks like this, all right? You've got your tunes, you've got your risers, you've got your cross members, and then the cross members can either be protected by an aluminum skin. Typically on higher horsepower, you'll see this, 90, 115 plus, are going to have the skin protected, or the aluminum skin to protect the cross members, or the just cross members are going to be exposed in your marine grade plywood. Now, I'm not concerned about the marine grade plywood getting wet. It is the last worry that I have on a pontoon because it's treated so well. They don't have rot issues anymore. Before, when they were using not the marine grade, which each layer is treated and then glued together, the kind of green wood, I guess they called it, they glued it all together and then treated it, and that did have problems 25 years ago. But the reason they do the skin is to protect the cross members from hitting that water. So if you can imagine, you're going down the water at 20 miles an hour and you hit a big wave, those tubes are going to splash the water up and they're going to hit those cross members, and it's going to kind of make a chugging effect, right? Where if it hits the skin, it's just going to slide right off. So the bigger the horsepower, the faster you're going to go, the more that chugging effect is going to be uncomfortable for the people on the boat. That's what the skin is there for. Yes, it protects the aluminum. Yes, it protects your wiring and everything, but it's really about a more comfortable ride, okay? So at this point, another manufacturing decision to have to make is, how long are we going to make our cross members? Are we going to make our cross members 8.5 feet wide like you see here? Because the sheets of plywood are 8.5 feet in most cases, the full length of the boat, or the full width of the boat, I'm sorry. Or are we going to cut our cross members at 8 feet and leave a 3-inch gap on each side before we hit that finish piece? And it's going to make the boat more structurally sound, but more expensive. Less structurally sound, that's not the right word, less stout, less sturdy, but less expensive. And then how are we going to do the corner pieces? Are we just going to finish it off, or are we going to use a rounded riser like this that's actually going to give some structural support to our bow and to our stern where the finish piece is, okay? So now it's time to put down the flooring. The first thing they're going to do is they're going to put a bead of some sort of waterproof adhesive, like you see here, or a tape that's going to go down that's going to provide some waterproof protection so that water doesn't just get in there and sit on the plywood, which really could cause some issues, but it's also going to give some sound dampening and reduce vibration. That's the major reason for it. And then as we lay the plywood, are we going to tongue and groove it and lay it on the cross member, or are we just going to butt them together? Now, I've been on pontoons that butt it together, and if it's not laid up right on a cross member like this, which it's not always, that water can shoot up, and there's no skin. That water can shoot up and come right through the plywood, even on a 75, 90 horsepower motor. It can potentially shoot that water up. That's why you would do a tongue and groove like this. Again, more expensive on the blue, less expensive on the red. May or may not be an issue for you. This is a Z channel, what that Z channel looks like. But what I'm showing here is they either lay the wiring through the cross members and under the M brackets and kind of lay it there. They'll put it in some chafe-resistant tubing and lay it out there. Or they may run the chafe-resistant tubing and run it actually through the cross members, which is going to protect it, dress it back, make it a little bit neater looking, but just another option that they have. Once we get to the flooring, we're going to lay the floor down. We're going to seal all the joints, whether it's tongue and grooved or whether it's just butted together. We're going to seal that with an adhesive and that's waterproof. And anywhere that there's a screw or a bolt going through, we're going to put a cover on it so that that doesn't show up through the flooring that you have, right? You're not going to have an imprint there by putting something like that on it. And then we're going to waterproof all of those seams, okay? So you're going to waterproof anywhere there's a screw going through, anywhere there's a seam, and that's an adhesive and a waterproof material. Now it's time for the flooring. So we're going to put down a nice, good adhesive that's waterproof again. So another layer of waterproof protection on the top end. And then we're going to lay out the flooring, whether it's your TPO, that hard plastic surface, carpet, which isn't used much anymore, or the seagrass bamboo weave that is really popular. Once that's done, now it's time to put the finishing edge on. Now, that finishing edge is going to kind of seal off the edge for you, where it's going to get that carpet down tight so that it doesn't start fraying up. It's going to go over the wood, and it's also going to protect it, so if you do bump into the dock, that you're not going to have any damage directly to the plywood. You're going to kind of transfer that impact over the whole thing, and it's going to look nicer. It's a finished piece. On the cap, on the corners, which is most susceptible to being hit on the dock, to being run into something, some manufacturers will use a big long piece to go around the corner, like you see there. Other manufacturers are just going to bring their finished pieces to the edge, and they're going to put a corner cap. Those corner caps are very susceptible to being run into the dock and being knocked off and kind of damaging that plywood. They've gotten smarter and smarter about it over the years, but again, it's a cost-saving measure, and everything in the construction process for the manufacturer is, how expensive do we want to build this boat? We could build this boat so it never, ever breaks, but nobody's going to buy it because it's too expensive. Or we're going to build this boat so it's as cheap as possible, but things are going to break. And that's the balancing act that every manufacturer is trying to do, but always deliver a safe boat, okay? Now it's time to put down the hardware. So we've got the cleat. This is what on the underside, before that skin is laid down, we are going to see they're going to backplate it in some manner. Maybe it's just some stainless steel washers and a nut, a locking nut, or a big, huge plate. So that's a way you can tell on the manufacturers that you're looking at kind of what level of quality are they going with a pretty good washer system, or are they really backplating it that's going to make that thing rock solid? Now, as this is going down the line, so we've got the tubes built, we've got the flooring going. During that process, there's a whole nother section of the factory that's churning out the helm stations. Now, they may be built in-house, where they're doing the fiberglass or the everything in-house, or they're ordering the helm and they're just putting in all the gauges and the wiring and the stereo, the throttle control, the cup holders and all that. So that all happens in another section, and they're pre-wiring everything. So they're away from the boat, they're putting in the gauges, they're putting in the stereo, they're putting in the throttle, they're putting in the steering system, and they're just wiring it up so that when we do get ready to put the helm on the boat, all they've got to do is plug in the wiring that's been run down the tubes, plug them into the helm, and test it. They're also testing all the systems in this thing. There's a QC portion as they're building the helms and doing the wiring there. As that's all going along, there's another section of the factory that's building the fence rails. Like we talked about, the tubes are very much manually, kind of an art, manually welded. The fence rails are manually welded. There's an individual that is welding the fence panels together based on a jig and a template for each style of boat, each length of boat. They weld that together. Another group of folks will put the paneling in. That paneling, the better manufacturers will use some sort of a sound dampening layer between the fence rails and the paneling, which makes it fit tighter. It doesn't rattle as much. And then we're going to bend the fence rails to get the contours we need for the boat. If it's an individual rail, they'll bend that, or they'll bend the whole panel together, as you can see up in that top left, so that now we can mount those fence rails onto the boat. Couple things about fence rails. You've got the corrugated or a flat panel. The corrugated is going to be stronger, a little bit more rigidity to it because of those ribs in it. On the other hand, if you dent it or ding it, you're not popping that baby out. It's gonna be less likely to dent, but if you do get a dent, and it can happen, it's going to be harder to repair without putting a whole new fence panel in. If you go with the flat, some people like the look, some people don't. But if you do have some damage to it, it's going to happen easier because it's not as strong, right? You don't have those ribs in there, so a lighter touch will ding it. But you have the opportunity that you might be able to pop it out and not be able to tell. I like the corrugated. I like the looks of it, and I think that's where your decision should lie: is do I like the corrugated or do I like the flat panel? Which one looks better? I think that's the decision. And then you've got the fencing itself. How tall is the fencing? So you'll see some manufacturers, the shorter the fencing, the less material, the cheaper the cost, right? The higher the fencing, the more material, the higher the cost. But you can also do a hybrid. You can get the fence up a little bit, but you can leave the gap so you're not using as much paneling, and you just have the fence rail. Again, that's kind of a medium, happy medium there. This boat is a fishing boat, you can tell, because that front bow area is lower, which is common in fishing boats, and everything in the back is going to be kind of the seating area. So that's the fence panels. Once those panels are built, now we're going to attach it. We're going to put a spacer in so that water can flow out if we take a wave over the bow, or if we get caught in a rainstorm, that water can just easily wash out the edge and go under the fence rail. So that little spacer there, then you're going to screw that down to the plywood flooring to mount the fence. Couple of things to think about on the fencing. Again, we talked about these welds are hand done. Are the welds good, quality welds? And then what size is the fence rail? Are they using real skinny fence rail? Or are they using more thick, kind of heavy duty fence rail? Again, it's going to relate to the cost. It's a give and take. You've got, hey, I want heavy duty material. Well, my cost is going to go up. I want to save on some price. Well, now it's more likely to have some damage that could be caused to it. As this is going on, there is either somebody in the factory that's making the furniture. Some of the manufacturers will make it in-house. Other manufacturers will buy their furniture from an outside vendor. They'll give them the specs for the upholstery, for the seats and everything, and they'll be shipped in. But the bottom line is, they will just have them on the factory floor, and as they're building a boat, they'll grab the furniture that goes on that boat. They're going to grab the helm that goes on that boat. They're going to grab the fencing that goes on that boat, and now we're going to start installing these things, okay? Again, if you notice, there's no robots. It's not like going to a Honda factory or a Ford factory and there's robots doing all the work and people just monitoring. No, this is all manually done. There's very, very few robotics, especially in a pontoon manufacturing. It's virtually all done by hand. You may have some robots that are I use that term loosely, that are moving the product to the right places, but everything is installed pretty much by hand. Now, once we've got the furniture and the fencing on, the helm is installed. Now it's time to hang the motor, to put on the other accessories, the ski tow bar, underwater lights, and depth finders. Remember, all of the wiring was pre-run through the tubes. Everything for the helm, from the helm is running back to the steering cables, the throttle cables, the fuel. All of that is being laid in, and so now we just have to attach it and do a little bit of testing and quality control. That's the last step of the build process. Is we've got the quality control that is going to be inspecting, is everything done properly? And this is happening throughout the entire process. The helm section has some quality control. The fencing has quality control. The pontoon has quality control. There's quality control being done throughout the whole thing. But before they pack that boat up and ship it, they're doing a checklist to make sure everything is right. They're going to shrink wrap that boat, take the bimini top and just wrap it up in there. That's usually not going to be installed. The helm seats may not be installed. They're just kind of setting the boat in a way that's going to travel well. And now they're going to load it up. And the dealer is responsible for kind of finishing off the boat once it arrives. So they've got to put the battery in. The boat probably has never been run on the water, so they've got to get the battery. They've got to prop it. They've got to put the bimini top on. They've got to put maybe a few things together if there's a windshield to put that on, and do their quality control check to make sure that the boat is ready to be delivered to the end client. They're ready to be shown on the showroom floor. That is all done at the dealer. Some dealers may do the hanging of the motor and do that rigging as well. And the reason why they would do that is they're typically smaller dealers that don't have as much inventory, so they can say, hey, we're going to get a double tune and we'll put a 50 or a 90 or a 115 on this, depending on what the client wants, and we'll just hang it instead of having a 50, a 90, and a 115 on the showroom floor. Same thing with the higher horsepowers. They've got a Tri-Toon, and it's rated for up to a 400 horsepower. They'll just have the boat and let you pick. Do you want a 200, a 250, a 350, or a 400? And then they'll hang that for you as well. There's not, there's no pluses or minuses really, other than the manufacturer would hang more motors. It's more systematic, so there's less likely to be an error. But typically in the smaller dealerships, they do a great job of that as well. And they load up and they send the boat out. And that is how a boat is built. So if you're looking for a pontoon, now you have an idea of what that process is, so you can see what you're looking at, where everything is that you need to inspect. In the First Time Boat Buyers Academy, if you're new to boat buying and you're doing some research, you really want to check this out. We walk through a 7-step process that goes from, hey, maybe we should buy a boat, to all of the decisions that you need to make a smart decision, including choosing the right style of boat, budgeting properly, negotiating, make sure you get the absolute best price. So you can buy your perfect boat at the absolute best price with 100% confidence. And that's what you'll get at the First Time Boat Buyers Academy. Check that out. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment. And remember, hit the like button. Remember, life truly is better on a boat.